Evelyn Carter stood outside her husband's office door with her 14-year-old son Lucas beside her, the lottery ticket still warm in her purse, and heard a woman's laugh. Intimate, knowing, the kind that comes after secrets have been shared. Her hand froze on the polished steel handle. Lucas looked up at her, confusion already clouding his face, and she wanted to pull him away, to protect him from whatever was happening on the other side of that door. But her feet wouldn't move. The woman's voice came again, speaking Korean in a tone so familiar it made Evelyn's stomach turn. Then her husband's voice, low and amused, responding in a way he never spoke to her anymore. "Mom?" Lucas whispered. Evelyn pushed the door open. Park Jin-woo sat behind his massive desk and perched on the edge of it, wearing the diamond necklace Evelyn had been told was lost 2 years ago, was Choi Soo-yeon, the company's VP of operations. They weren't touching, not exactly, but the space between them held everything Evelyn needed to know. Soo-yeon's hand rested near Jin-woo's, her body angled toward him in a way that spoke of countless other moments just like this one. The woman's expression shifted from surprise to something worse. Amusement. Jin-woo's face hardened instantly, not with guilt, but with irritation at the interruption. "Evelyn." His voice was clipped, dismissive. "You're not supposed to be here." She felt Lucas tense beside her, his hand gripping the strap of his backpack. 15 years of marriage, 15 years of making herself smaller, quieter, more accommodating, and this was where it had led. The lottery ticket in her purse suddenly felt like a weapon she hadn't known she was carrying. $80 million. She'd come here to tell him they were finally secure, that all her sacrifices had led to something miraculous. Instead, she'd walked into the ruins of everything she'd believed about her life. "I won the lottery," she said, her voice steadier than she expected. $80 million. The room went silent. Soo-yeon's smirk faded. Jin-woo's eyes sharpened, calculating, and Evelyn watched him process this information with the same cold efficiency he applied to business deals. Not joy, not pride, strategy. "We'll discuss this at home," he said in Korean, already dismissing her. "This isn't the time or place." "No," Evelyn replied in the same language, feeling Lucas shift uncomfortably beside her. "I think this is exactly the time and place. How long?" "Evelyn, how long have you been sleeping with her?" Soo-yeon laughed, actually laughed, and slid off the desk with the grace of someone who knew she belonged there. She said something in rapid Korean to Jin-woo, her tone mocking and intimate. He didn't respond, but he didn't stop her either. "What did she say?" Evelyn demanded. Soo-yeon switched to English, her accent crisp and deliberately cruel. "I said it's a shame you had to find out this way. Jin-woo wanted to tell you, himself, but you're always so emotional. He was worried you'd make a scene." She touched the necklace at her throat, stroking it like a pet. "This looks better on me anyway, don't you think? It never really suited you." "Mom, let's go," Lucas said quietly in English, tugging her arm, his voice shaking. She let him pull her backward, out of the office, but kept her eyes on her husband until the door closed between them. The walk to the elevator felt endless. Lucas silent and pale beside her, the other employees pretending not to stare as they passed. In the parking garage, she finally let herself breathe, leaning against the car while Lucas climbed into the passenger seat without a word. Her hand shook as she started the engine. The lottery ticket sat in her purse like evidence of her own foolishness. She'd actually believed the money would change things, would make Jin-woo see her as an equal instead of an accessory he could discard whenever something better came along. She'd been so stupid. "Are you okay?" Lucas asked after several minutes of silence. "No," she admitted, because she was done lying to her son. "But I will be." If you've ever discovered the person you trusted most was living a double life, if you've ever felt like a fool for believing someone's lies, hit that like button right now. Because what Evelyn does next, it's going to make you stand up and cheer. And if you don't subscribe after seeing how she destroys him, you're going to regret it. Don't say I didn't warn you. Drop a comment and tell me, would you have stayed to fight or run with the money? I need to know. The house felt different when they got home, like a stage set she'd been performing on for years without realizing it. Lucas went straight to his room, and Evelyn stood in the kitchen she'd renovated to Jinwoo's specifications, in the house she'd maintained to his standards, and felt the weight of 15 years pressing down on her shoulders. Her phone buzzed. Jinwoo, of course. "We need to talk. Don't do anything stupid." She deleted the message without responding. Her grandmother had left her $200,000 when she died, money that was supposed to be Evelyn's safety net. Jinwoo had convinced her to let him invest it, promising to grow it into something substantial. She'd believed him. She'd signed the papers he put in front of her without reading them carefully, trusting that her husband had her best interests at heart. Now she wondered if that money had ever existed at all, or if it had disappeared into one of his accounts the moment she'd signed it over. The front door opened. Jinwoo strode in like he owned everything, which, legally, he did. Community property only worked if both people had been honest about what they owned. "We need to talk about the lottery money," he said, not even pretending to address the affair. "You need to be smart about this. We should set up a trust, use my financial advisors. This kind of money requires sophisticated management." "No," he stopped mid-stride, as if the word itself was foreign. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean, I've already talked to someone. I opened my own accounts. The money is in my name only." She watched his mask slip, just for a second, and saw the flash of fear underneath. "It's mine, Jinwoo. Not ours, mine." "Don't be ridiculous. We're married. We make decisions like this together." "Like you made the decision to sleep with Soo-yeon together with me? Like you made the decision to take my inheritance and make it disappear?" His face went still, confirming what she'd only suspected. "I'm done making decisions with you. I want a divorce." He laughed, actually laughed, and moved closer, his body language shifting to something more threatening. "You think you can divorce me? You think you can take my son and my money and just walk away? You have no idea how this works, Evelyn. You're an American woman married to a Korean CEO. Do you know what the courts will do? What my family will do? My mother has connections you can't even imagine. You'll be destroyed. Lucas will be taken from you. And when it's over, you'll have nothing." "Maybe," she said quietly, refusing to back away even though every instinct screamed at her to run. "But I'll be free." He left then, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows, and Evelyn sank into a chair, her whole body shaking. Lucas appeared in the doorway, his face older than it had been that morning. "I heard," he said. "I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry, Mom. Just don't let him win." She wouldn't. She couldn't. Not anymore. The next morning, Evelyn called every divorce attorney in Seoul until she found one willing to take on a chaebol family. Attorney Yoon Dae-jung had a reputation for being ruthless, for taking cases no one else would touch. "You're the fifth woman this month who wants to divorce a chaebol," Yoon said when Evelyn walked into her office. The older woman's sharp eyes assessed her with the precision of a surgeon examining a patient. "But you're the first American. Why me?" "Because the other four attorneys told me I'd never win against the Park family," Evelyn said, sitting down without being invited. "They said I should take whatever settlement Jinwoo offers and be grateful." "And what did you tell them?" "I told them to go to hell." Yoon smiled, thin and dangerous as a blade. "Smart woman. Tell me everything." Evelyn did. The affair with Soo-yeon, the missing inheritance, the years of being treated like an embarrassment by Jinwoo's family, the subtle and not-so-subtle racism she'd endured. Yoon listened without interrupting, taking notes in quick, efficient strokes. "Your husband is going to come after the lottery money," Yoon said finally. "He'll claim it was purchased with marital funds, which technically it was. $2 from your grocery allowance is still community property." Evelyn's stomach sank. "So he gets half?" "Not if we can prove a pattern of financial abuse and fraud." "You said your inheritance disappeared?" Evelyn nodded. "We need to find it. We need to show that he's been systematically stealing from you throughout your marriage." That changes everything. How do I prove that? Leave that to me. But Evelyn? Yoon leaned forward, her expression serious. This is going to get ugly. Chaebol families don't lose quietly. They'll come after your reputation, your credibility, maybe even try to have you declared unfit as a mother. They'll dig up every mistake you've ever made, every moment of anger or frustration, and twist it into evidence that you're unstable. Are you prepared for that? Evelyn thought about Lucas's face when he'd told her not to let Jinwoo win. She thought about 15 years of making herself invisible, of swallowing insults from her mother-in-law, of pretending she didn't notice the way Jinwoo's colleagues looked through her at company events. She thought about that necklace around Soo-yeon's throat. I'm prepared, she said. That evening, Jinwoo's mother arrived at the house without warning, her face set in the same expression of cold displeasure Evelyn had seen for 15 years. Park Yoon-hee had never approved of her son's marriage to an American woman, had never bothered to hide her disappointment that her grandson looked more like his father than his mother. She swept into the living room like she owned it, which in her mind, she probably did. This divorce is unacceptable, Yoon-hee announced in Korean. You will withdraw your petition immediately. No, Evelyn replied in the same language, her accent still imperfect after all these years, but her meaning clear. You are embarrassing this family. Do you understand what you're doing? My son has built an empire and you're trying to tear it down over a moment of weakness. A moment? Evelyn felt something crack inside her chest. He's been having an affair for years. He stole my inheritance. He's been using me as a convenient cover while he builds a whole other life with someone else. You were never suitable for this family, Yoon-hee said, switching to English suddenly, her pronunciation perfect and deliberate. Do you know what my friend said when Jinwoo brought you home? They pitied me. A black daughter-in-law? They wondered what I'd done to deserve such shame. Evelyn's hands clenched at her sides. And yet you never said anything. Because Jinwoo insisted. He thought you were exotic, interesting, a phase. I assumed he'd grow tired of you. She smiled coldly. I was right. You are too cold, Evelyn shot back, her voice shaking with rage. Too willing to look the other way while your son destroys people. Does that make you a proper Korean mother? Yoon-hee's face went white with fury. How dare you! How dare I? How dare you come into my house and tell me I should accept being cheated on, lied to, stolen from? What kind of woman teaches her son that's acceptable? A woman who understands that marriage is not about happiness. It's about duty, stability, legacy. Then your son learned his lessons well. He's dutiful to everyone except his wife, stable in every relationship except his marriage. And his legacy? It's built on lies and stolen money. Lucas appeared in the doorway, his face hard with an anger Evelyn had never seen before. Get out of our house, he said in English, then repeated it in Korean when his grandmother pretended not to understand. Get out, now. Yoon-hee looked at her grandson like he'd slapped her, her composure finally cracking. You don't understand what you're doing. You're throwing away your heritage, your family. My family is Mom, Lucas said. You and Dad, you're just people I'm related to. Yoon-hee turned and left without another word, and Evelyn pulled Lucas into a hug, feeling him shake against her. I hate them, he whispered. I hate what they've done to you. I know, baby, I know, but hate wasn't going to be enough. She needed evidence, leverage, something to protect herself and Lucas from the full force of the Park family's power and money. She needed help from someone on the inside. The next day, Evelyn received an unexpected email from Kim Min-ji, Jinwoo's executive assistant. They'd never been close. Min-ji had always maintained the professional distance expected of someone in her position. But the message was brief and to the point. We need to talk, not at the office. I have information you need. They met at a coffee shop in Itaewon, far enough from Daehan Technologies that no one would recognize them. Min-ji looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, her usually impeccable appearance slightly disheveled. She slid a USB drive across the table without preamble. Everything's on here, Min-ji said, her voice low and urgent. Financial records, emails, documents with forged signatures. Your husband has been embezzling from the company pension fund for 3 years. He's also been running shell companies that exist solely to hide money from taxes and his board of directors. And your name is on some of the paperwork. Evelyn's blood went cold. What do you mean? My name? He forged your signature on incorporation documents for 3 separate companies. If the fraud is discovered, you're legally liable as a co-owner. You could go to prison, Evelyn. He set you up as his insurance policy. If he goes down, you go down with him. The coffee shop spun around her. The other customers blurred into background noise. Why are you telling me this? Minji's expression was bitter, haunted. Because I helped him do the same thing to his first wife. Did you know he was married before? No, of course you didn't. He erases the women who become inconvenient. I watched him destroy her reputation, take everything she had, and leave her with nothing. I told myself it wasn't my business, that I was just doing my job. But I'm tired, Evelyn. I'm tired of being complicit in his destruction. And I won't watch him do it to you, too. Evelyn's hands trembled as she took the USB drive. What happens to you when this comes out? I'll be fine. I've been documenting everything, protecting myself. I have my own lawyer, my own evidence that I was following orders under duress. But you need to move fast. He knows about the lottery money now, and he's desperate. Desperate people do dangerous things. And Evelyn? He's been talking to people. Lawyers, private investigators, even people in the police department. He's building a case to have you declared mentally unfit. He wants full custody of Lucas and access to your lottery winnings. That night, Evelyn met with attorney Yoon and a forensic accountant named Kwon Sung-ho, a quiet man with sharp eyes who spent 3 hours going through the files on Minji's USB drive. When he finally looked up, his expression was grim. Your husband is going to prison, Kwon said bluntly. The only question is whether you're going with him. These forged signatures are good, really good. If we can't prove they're fake, you're looking at fraud charges, tax evasion, possibly embezzlement, depending on how deep the investigation goes. Can you prove they're fake? Evelyn asked, her voice barely steady. Maybe, but it's going to take time, and time is something you don't have. The moment your husband realizes you have this information, he's going to move against you hard and fast. He'll freeze accounts, file emergency custody motions, possibly even have you arrested before we can establish your innocence. Yoon leaned forward. We need to flip the script. Right now, he thinks he has all the power. We need to make him react to us instead of the other way around. Evelyn, I need you to do something that's going to feel wrong, but trust me. It's the only way to protect yourself and Lucas. What? We leak this information to the Financial Regulatory Board. Not all of it, just enough to trigger an investigation. Your husband will panic, and when people panic, they make mistakes. We need him making mistakes. Evelyn thought about Lucas, about the way he'd defended her to his grandmother, about the future she was trying to build for both of them. She thought about going to prison for crimes she didn't commit, about losing her son, about everything she'd already survived. Do it, she said. The investigation hit Daehan Technologies like a bomb 3 days later. Evelyn was having breakfast with Lucas when her phone exploded with notifications, news alerts, text messages, missed calls. The Financial Regulatory Board had announced a formal investigation into Daehan Technologies for pension fund irregularities and potential embezzlement. The company's stock dropped 15% in the first hour of trading. Jinwoo called 17 times. She didn't answer. Instead, she took Lucas to school, kissed him goodbye, and drove to Attorney Yoon's office, where they watched the news coverage together. Jinwoo looked composed in his emergency press conference, confident and reassuring as he promised full cooperation with the investigation and expressed his shock at the allegations. But Evelyn could see the fear in his eyes, the slight tremor in his hands as he gripped the podium. He knows it was you, Yoon observed. Good, Evelyn replied. He came to the house that night, bypassing the security code she'd changed and letting himself in with a key she didn't know he still had. Evelyn was in the kitchen when she heard the door, and something in the sound made her reach for her phone, her finger hovering over the emergency call button. Jinwoo appeared in the doorway, and for the first time since she'd known him, he looked genuinely rattled. His tie was loosened, his hair disheveled, his eyes wild with barely contained panic and rage. "What did you do?" he demanded. "I protected myself." "You're destroying everything, the company, the family legacy, my reputation. Do you have any idea what you've done? 3,000 people work for Daehan. 3,000 families depend on those jobs, and you're willing to destroy all of that to get back at me." "Your reputation?" Evelyn laughed, harsh and bitter. "You destroyed that yourself when you decided to steal from your own employees' retirement funds. I just made sure everyone knew about it. And those 3,000 people? You're the one who put their jobs at risk when you started embezzling." "Not me!" He moved closer, and she stepped back, her phone still clutched in her hand. "You think you're so smart," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You think you can take me down and walk away clean? I put your name on those documents, Evelyn. You're just as guilty as I am in the eyes of the law. You go to prison too. Except your signatures are real, and mine are forgeries. We've already had them analyzed. We have proof." His face went white, then red. "You're lying. Minji helped me. She gave me everything. Years of documents, emails, recorded conversations. You should have treated your assistant better, Jinwoo. She knows where all the bodies are buried because she's the one who helped you bury them." He lunged for her phone, and Evelyn stumbled backward, her hip hitting the counter hard. Pain shot through her side. "Mom?" Lucas's voice came from the stairs, frightened and young. Jinwoo froze, his hand still outstretched, and Evelyn saw him realize what he'd almost done, how far he'd been about to go. "Get out," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. "Get out of this house, and don't come back. If you ever touch me again, if you ever threaten me again, I will make sure every single piece of evidence I have gets sent not just to the regulatory board, but to every news outlet in Seoul. They'll crucify you. Your mother's friends will have a lot more to gossip about than my skin color." He left, and Evelyn locked the door behind him with shaking hands. Lucas came downstairs, pale and scared, and she pulled him into a fierce hug. "We're okay," she whispered. "We're going to be okay." But she wasn't sure she believed it yet. The next week brought revelations that shattered what remained of Evelyn's understanding of her marriage. Attorney Yoon called her into the office with an expression Evelyn had learned meant bad news, and when she sat down, Yoon slid a file folder across the desk. "We hired a private investigator," Yoon said. "I'm sorry, Evelyn. I know this is going to hurt." Inside the folder were photographs. Jinwoo and Soo-yeon, but not just at the office, at a house in Busan, shopping together in what was clearly a domestic scene. Jinwoo pushing a little girl on a swing, the child's face alight with laughter. Another photo of him reading to her at bedtime. And worst of all, Jinwoo holding the little girl, maybe 4 years old, who had his eyes and Soo-yeon's smile, at what looked like her birthday party. "He has another daughter," Evelyn whispered. "He's been maintaining 2 families for at least 5 years. The house in Busan is in a shell company name, but he's the primary resident according to the neighbors. They know him as Soo-yeon's husband. They think Lucas is the child from a previous relationship that ended badly." Evelyn couldn't breathe. 5 years. While she'd been raising Lucas alone because Jinwoo was always too busy with work, he'd been building an entire separate life with another woman and another child. While she'd been eating dinner by herself, wondering why her husband never came home anymore, he'd been tucking a daughter she didn't know existed into bed. Every business trip to Busan, every late night at the office, every weekend conference, all lies. "There's more," Yoon said quietly. "The daughter, her name is Park Min-seo. She's enrolled in the most expensive preschool in Busan. Jinwoo pays for everything. The house, Soo-yeon's car, the child's education, even a nanny. He's been spending approximately $300,000 a year on this second family. Money that should have been community property in your marriage. I need to see Lucas, Evelyn said, her voice hollow. Evelyn, I need to see my son right now. She picked Lucas up from school early, and they drove to the park where she used to take him when he was little, before Jinwoo's career had consumed everything, before she'd learned to make herself invisible. They sat on a bench, and she showed him the photographs, watching his face crumple as he processed what he was seeing. He has another kid? Lucas's voice cracked, tears spilling down his cheeks. He has a daughter, and he never... All those times he missed my games, my concerts, my birthdays, because he said he was working. I know, baby. I know. Does he even love us? Did he ever love us? Or were we just... what? His American experiment? His diversity trophy? Lucas stood abruptly, pacing, his hands clenched into fists. He used to tell me he was sorry for missing stuff. That work was demanding, but he'd make it up to me. And the whole time he was with them. With her. Reading bedtime stories. To a kid who isn't even me. Evelyn pulled him back to the bench, wrapping her arms around him as he sobbed. I think he loved us in the only way he knows how to love anyone. But it was never enough. It was never real. I hate him, Lucas said, and this time Evelyn didn't tell him not to. Some things deserved hatred. Stop right here. I need you to look at what's happening. A powerful man lies, cheats, steals from his employees, maintains a whole secret family, and somehow people still want to paint him as the victim? If this makes your blood boil, smash that like button. If you've ever been blamed for someone else's betrayal, if you've ever been called crazy for reacting to abuse, drop a comment right now. And if you're not subscribed yet, what are you even doing? You think this story ends with Evelyn defeated? You think Jinwoo gets away with this? Subscribe and find out how a black woman with a lottery ticket takes down an entire Korean chaebol empire. I dare you to keep watching without subscribing. That night, Jinwoo violated the restraining order Yoon had filed and showed up at the house again. This time, Evelyn called the police before opening the door, and she kept her phone recording in her pocket as she faced him through the screen. I need to talk to Lucas, Jinwoo said, trying to sound reasonable and paternal. He won't answer my calls. Because he knows about your daughter in Busan. He knows you've been lying to him his entire life. Jinwoo's mask cracked. You told him? You had no right. I had every right. He's my son too, and he deserved to know the truth about who his father really is. I want to see him. Now. You can't keep poisoning him against me. I'm not poisoning him against you. You did that yourself. Every lie, every missed birthday, every promise you broke while you were playing house with your other family. That's what poisoned him. He's my son, Evelyn. You can't keep him from me. Watch me. She heard the police sirens in the distance. You have a restraining order. You're not supposed to be here. And in about 30 seconds, you're going to be arrested if you don't leave. He leaned closer to the screen, his voice dropping to something cold and vicious. You're going to regret this. All of it. I'm going to take everything from you. The house, the money, Lucas. I'll prove you're an unfit mother. Unstable. Delusional. You're going to end up with nothing. Just like you were when I met you. And Lucas, he'll grow up knowing his mother destroyed his father's life out of spite. The police arrived and took Evelyn's statement, documenting Jinwoo's violation of the restraining order. She added the recording to the growing file of evidence against him, but Jinwoo's words stayed with her, echoing in the empty house after Lucas had gone to bed. He was going to come after her with everything he had, and despite all her preparation, she wasn't sure she was ready for what that meant. The custody hearing was a nightmare. Jinwoo's lawyers painted Evelyn as an unstable, vindictive woman who was trying to alienate Lucas from his father out of spite over the divorce. They brought up every argument she'd ever had with Jinwoo, every moment of frustration or anger, and twisted it into evidence of her unfitness as a mother. They suggested she was mentally unstable, that the lottery money had made her irrational and paranoid, that she needed psychiatric evaluation before being allowed unsupervised access to her own son. Mrs. Park has demonstrated a pattern of erratic behavior, Jinwoo's lead attorney argued. She's made wild accusations of embezzlement without proof. We have proof, Attorney Yoon interjected. She's attempted to destroy her husband's reputation and career. She's violated his privacy by hiring investigators to follow him, and she's deliberately turned their son against his father by sharing inappropriate adult information with a minor child. She's vindictive, unstable, and potentially dangerous. Evelyn sat through it all, her hands clenched in her lap, watching the judge's face for any sign of what he was thinking. Attorney Yoon fought back hard, presenting the evidence of Jinwoo's affairs, his secret family, his financial crimes. But Korea's family court still favored fathers, especially wealthy, powerful fathers, and Evelyn could feel the judgment slipping away from her. Then Lucas asked to speak. The judge hesitated, clearly reluctant to put a child in this position, but Lucas was insistent. I need to say something. Please. The judge allowed it, and Evelyn watched her 14-year-old son walk to the stand with his shoulders back and his head high. He looked like Jinwoo in that moment, confident, commanding, but when he spoke, he sounded like himself. My father's lawyers are saying my mom is trying to turn me against my dad, Lucas said in clear, careful Korean. But that's not true. My dad turned me against him all by himself. He lied to me. He lied to my mom. He has another daughter he never told me about, a 4-year-old sister I didn't know existed. And when I found out, when I tried to talk to him about it, he didn't apologize. He told me I was too young to understand adult relationships. Lucas's voice grew stronger, steadier. But I'm not too young to know what loyalty means. I'm not too young to know what honesty means. And I'm not too young to know that my mom is the only parent who's ever told me the truth. She's the one who came to my games when Dad was working. She's the one who helped me with homework. She's the one who was actually there. And now I know why Dad was never home. Because he was with them, with his real family in Busan. Lucas, the judge said gently, do you feel safe with your mother? Yes. Has she ever hurt you or made you feel unsafe? Never. The only time I felt unsafe was when my dad grabbed her. When he came to our house and tried to take her phone and pushed her into the counter. That's when I felt unsafe. Jinwoo's face went pale. His lawyers exchanged quick, worried glances. The judge asked Lucas a few more questions. Careful, gentle questions about where he felt safe, who he trusted, what he wanted. Lucas answered everyone with the same steady conviction. He wanted to live with his mother. The ruling came down a week later. Primary custody to Evelyn, supervised visitation for Jinwoo pending the outcome of the criminal investigation, and a stern warning that any further violations of the restraining order would result in a complete suspension of parental rights. Evelyn sat in Attorney Yoon's office and cried for the first time since this had all started, not from sadness, but from sheer overwhelming relief. We're not done yet, Yoon warned. The criminal investigation is going to get worse before it gets better, and your husband is desperate. Desperate men are dangerous. She was right. 3 days after the custody ruling, Jinwoo held a press conference, not as a corporate CEO responding to an investigation, but as a wronged husband seeking sympathy. He stood in front of cameras with red-rimmed eyes and announced that his wife was suffering from serious mental health issues, that she'd become paranoid and delusional after winning the lottery, that he was seeking full custody of their son for his own safety. He cried, actual tears streaming down his face, as he talked about his fear for Lucas, his worry that Evelyn's instability might put their son in danger. I love my wife, Jinwoo said, his voice breaking. I want her to get help, but I can't stand by and watch while she destroys herself and potentially harms our son. The allegation she's made against me, They're symptoms of her condition. I've tried to protect her privacy, but now I have to speak out for Lucas's sake. The Korean media ate it up. Within hours, Evelyn was trending on social media, and the comments were vicious. Gold digger, crazy American, bad mother. Someone dug up photos of her from 15 years ago and compared them to recent pictures, suggesting she'd let herself go. And no wonder her husband had strayed. They called Lucas a half-breed and speculated that Jinwoo's real family in Busan was proof he'd never wanted a mixed-race son in the first place. One comment with thousands of likes read, "She should be grateful a man like Park Jinwoo married her at all. Now she wants to destroy him because he finally saw what she really is." Evelyn stopped reading after the first 100 comments. Lucas wanted to respond, to defend her online, but she wouldn't let him. "They want a reaction," she told him. "They want us to look as crazy as your father says we are. We're not going to give them that." Instead, Attorney Yoon released a carefully worded statement along with selected pieces of evidence, enough to make it clear that Jinwoo's accusations were baseless, but not so much that they compromised the criminal investigation. Financial records showing the embezzlement. Forensic analysis proving Evelyn's signatures were forged. Documentation of Jinwoo's secret family in Busan, complete with lease agreements and school enrollment forms bearing his signature. The narrative began to shift, slowly at first, then faster as more details emerged. Financial regulators announced they'd found significant evidence of embezzlement and fraud. The company's board placed Jinwoo on immediate administrative leave. His mother released a statement disavowing his actions and expressing the family's commitment to cooperating fully with investigators, a calculated move to distance the Park family from Jinwoo's crimes. But the damage was done. Evelyn couldn't go to the grocery store without people staring, couldn't take Lucas to school without parents whispering. She was no longer invisible. Now she was notorious, and she wasn't sure which was worse. Then Kim Min-ji did something that changed everything. Without telling Evelyn or Attorney Yoon, she released her entire archive of documents to the press, not just the evidence of financial crimes, but everything. Emails showing Jinwoo's calculation in marrying Evelyn for the optics. "She makes me look progressive and international. The board will love it." Messages where he laughed about her naivety with Soo-yeon. "She actually thinks I invested her grandmother's money." She signed everything without even reading it. Records of how he'd systematically stolen from Evelyn's inheritance and used it to fund his other family. Even voice recordings of Jinwoo instructing Min-ji to forge Evelyn's signature on documents saying, "If this goes wrong, she takes the fall, not me." The public response was immediate and brutal. Jinwoo went from sympathetic wronged husband to calculating monster overnight. His company's stock entered free fall, dropping 40% in a single trading day. The board fired him outright, voiding his severance package and announcing their intention to pursue civil damages for the harm his actions had caused the company. Criminal prosecutors upgraded the charges to include fraud, forgery, and embezzlement with a sentence recommendation of 8 to 12 years if convicted. And then, Daehan Technologies filed for bankruptcy protection. Evelyn was having coffee with Kwon Sung-ho when the news broke, and they watched the announcement together on his office television. The CEO who'd replaced Jinwoo stood at a podium, his face grave as he explained that years of financial mismanagement and fraud had left the company unable to meet its obligations. 3,000 employees, most of them innocent of any wrongdoing, suddenly faced unemployment. The pension fund, already depleted by Jinwoo's embezzlement, was likely going to collapse entirely, leaving hundreds of retired workers without the security they'd spent their lives building. "This is my fault," Evelyn whispered, watching footage of employees leaving the building with boxes of their belongings, some of them crying. "No," Kwon said firmly. "This is his fault. He built this bomb. You just made sure it detonated in a controlled way instead of taking you down with it." But that didn't change the reality of 3,000 people losing their jobs. It didn't change the fact that in trying to save herself and Lucas, she'd helped destroy the livelihoods of people who'd done nothing wrong. She watched an interview with a middle-aged man who'd worked at Daehan for 23 years, who had 2 kids in college, who didn't know how he was going to pay his mortgage. She watched a woman in her 60s explain that she'd retired last year, counting on her pension, and now she'd have to go back to work just to survive. That night, she couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the lottery money sitting in her account, money she'd won by pure chance, money that could maybe make a difference. She thought about Jinwoo's crimes and her own complicity, even if that complicity had been unconscious. She thought about what justice actually meant and whether revenge and justice were the same thing. By morning, she'd made a decision that most people would call insane. Evelyn called Kwon and attorney Yoon to her house and laid out a plan that made both of them stare at her like she'd lost her mind. She wanted to buy Daehan Technologies, not to destroy it, not for revenge, to save it, to restructure the pension fund, to protect the jobs Jinwoo had endangered, to build something better from the ruins of his corruption. You're talking about investing tens of millions of dollars into a company that's facing criminal investigation and bankruptcy, Kwon said slowly. A company your husband destroyed. That's insane. Maybe, Evelyn agreed, but I have $80 million that I did nothing to earn except buy a lottery ticket on impulse. 3,000 people are about to lose everything because of my husband's crimes. If I can use some of that money to fix what he broke, shouldn't I? You don't owe these people anything, Yoon pointed out. Legally, morally, you're not responsible for what Jinwoo did. I know, but I want to do it anyway. Why? Kwon asked. Give me one good reason why you should throw your money at a sinking ship. Evelyn thought about the employees she'd seen on TV, about their faces when they talked about losing everything. She thought about being invisible for 15 years, about how it felt to be erased. Because I've spent my entire adult life being told I don't belong in this country, in this culture, in this family. Jinwoo's mother said I was ashamed to the park name. The media calls me an outsider who married for money and status. Even people who should know better look at me and see someone who doesn't fit. She met their eyes. I'm tired of being invisible or notorious. I want to be someone who builds things. Someone who matters. Not because I married the right man or won the lottery, but because I chose to do something that mattered. It took 6 weeks to structure the deal. Evelyn worked with Kwon to create a holding company, Carter Holdings LLC, that would acquire Daehan Technologies' assets through the bankruptcy proceedings. She negotiated with the board, the creditors, the regulatory agencies. She sat through meetings where men twice her age explained things to her slowly and carefully, assuming she couldn't possibly understand the complexity of what she was attempting. Mrs. Park, one particularly condescending creditor said during a negotiation session, I don't think you understand the liability you'd be taking on. This company has significant debt, ongoing legal issues, and a damaged reputation. You'd be better off investing your lottery winnings in something stable. Evelyn smiled, thin and sharp. Mr. Kim, I've reviewed every financial document, every legal filing, every creditor claim. I understand exactly what I'm taking on. What I don't understand is why you're still calling me Mrs. Park when I've asked you 3 times to call me Ms. Carter. Now, are we going to negotiate in good faith, or are you going to keep wasting my time? She smiled and nodded, and then proceeded to demonstrate exactly how much she did understand, until they stopped patronizing her and started treating her as what she was, a serious investor with serious resources and a better grasp of the company's situation than most of them had. The final acquisition price was $42 million. Evelyn now owned 51% of Daehan Technologies. Jinwoo found out when the announcement hit the business news. According to Minji, who was still technically his assistant until the transition completed, he put his fist through his home office wall when he saw Evelyn's face on the screen, heard the news anchor describe her as the new majority owner of Daehan Technologies, stepping in to save the company her ex-husband nearly destroyed. He called Evelyn 37 times that day. She didn't answer. Instead, she went to Daehan headquarters for the first time as the majority owner and addressed the employees who'd gathered in the main conference room, terrified, and uncertain about their futures. The room was packed, people standing along the walls, others sitting on the floor. They watched her walk to the front with expressions ranging from skepticism to outright hostility. She was still Jinwoo's wife in their minds, still the American woman who'd somehow caused all of this. "I know who I am to most of you," she told them in Korean, her voice steady despite her nervousness. "I'm Jinwoo's wife, the American, the outsider. And I know what you're thinking, that I bought this company to get revenge on him, to destroy what he built. But that's not why I'm here." She paused, looking out at their faces. "I'm here because 3,000 people shouldn't lose their jobs because one man decided to steal. I'm here because you deserve better than what he gave you. And I'm here to make sure this company survives, not just for me or my son, but for all of you." Someone in the back shouted in Korean, "Why should we trust you? You were married to him. You had to know what he was doing." "I didn't know," Evelyn said firmly. "He made sure I didn't know. He forged my signature on documents, hid his crimes behind shell companies, and when I started asking questions, he tried to have me declared mentally unfit and take our son away from me. I was a victim of his fraud just like you were. The difference is, I have the resources to fix what he broke, and you deserve to have someone try." She outlined her plan: restructure the pension fund with an immediate cash infusion to cover the stolen amounts, retain every employee willing to stay, implement new oversight and transparency measures to prevent future fraud. She also announced that she was hiring an entirely new executive team, and that Jinwoo's remaining loyalists would be replaced with people committed to ethical business practices. "I can't promise this will be easy," she continued. "We have a long road ahead, but I can promise you transparency, honesty, and my commitment to rebuilding this company the right way. You've already survived the worst. Now let's build something better." The response was cautious, but hopeful. People wanted to believe her, but she was still Jinwoo's wife, still the woman who'd been married to the man who'd stolen from them. She would have to earn their trust, one decision at a time. The divorce settlement came through 2 months later, after weeks of contentious mediation. Evelyn kept the lottery winnings, the house, primary custody of Lucas, and her 51% stake in Daehan Technologies. Jinwoo kept enough assets to live comfortably. She wasn't trying to destroy him completely, just remove his ability to hurt anyone else. He received visitation rights with Lucas, and his freedom. The prosecutors had offered a plea deal that involved full restitution, 5 years of probation, 1,000 hours of community service, and a permanent ban from serving as an officer or director of any public company. He'd avoid prison largely because Evelyn's acquisition of the company had made the victims whole. She saw him one last time, at the mediation where they signed the final papers. He looked diminished somehow, smaller than she remembered, his confidence eroded by consequences he'd never expected to face. The expensive suit couldn't hide the weight he'd lost, the gray that had appeared in his hair, the deep lines around his eyes. He signed his name with sharp, angry strokes, and when he looked at her, she saw hatred in his eyes. "You destroyed me," he said quietly in Korean, making sure the mediators couldn't hear. Evelyn switched to English, her voice calm and clear. "No, you destroyed yourself. I just stopped covering for you. I gave you everything. A home, a family, a place in society. And this is how you repay me? You gave me nothing that wasn't for your own benefit. I was your diversity prop, your American trophy wife who made you look progressive and international. You never saw me as a person, Jinwoo. You saw me as an asset to manage. Well, I'm done being managed." He left without another word, and Evelyn walked out of that office knowing she'd never see him again except in the context of their son. The marriage was over, the war was over, she'd won, but the victory felt more like exhaustion than triumph. Life settled into a new rhythm over the following year. Evelyn threw herself into running Daehan Technologies, learning the business from the ground up, making decisions that sometimes worked and sometimes didn't, but always with transparency and integrity. She hired a diverse executive team, implemented new oversight systems, and slowly began to rebuild the company's reputation. The company stabilized, then slowly began to grow again. Employees who'd been terrified of losing their jobs started to believe in the future again. The pension fund was fully restored, with additional protections put in place to prevent future theft. Lucas adjusted to the divorce better than Evelyn had expected. He saw his father on scheduled weekends, supervised at first, then gradually unsupervised as Jinwoo demonstrated he could maintain appropriate boundaries. Their relationship was strained, built on careful politeness rather than genuine warmth, but it existed. Jinwoo was trying, in his limited way, to be present for his son. It would never be enough to repair the damage he'd done, but it was something. Evelyn started dating, cautiously, carefully, not looking for anything serious but open to the possibility of connection. She made friends among the other parents at Lucas's school, slowly building a life that belonged to her instead of to her role as someone's wife. She was still the subject of gossip sometimes, still faced prejudice and judgment from people who thought she didn't belong in the position she held, but she'd learned to care less about what other people thought. She had work that mattered, a son who was thriving, and a sense of purpose she'd never had before. Then, 18 months after the divorce was finalized, Lucas came home from a weekend with his father and went straight to his room without speaking. Evelyn gave him space for an hour, then knocked gently on his door. "Can I come in?" "Yeah." He was lying on his bed, staring at the ceiling, his face set in lines too hard for a 15-year-old. Evelyn sat on the edge of his bed and waited, knowing he'd talk when he was ready. "Dad wants to get back together with you," Lucas said finally, his voice flat. Evelyn's stomach dropped. "What?" "He said," Lucas's voice cracked. "He said he's been going to therapy, that he understands now what he did wrong, that he wants to try again, to be a real family. He asked me to talk to you about it, to convince you to give him another chance." "Lucas," "I told him no. I told him he was crazy if he thought you'd ever take him back after everything he did. But then he started crying, Mom. Actually crying. Not fake crying like at that press conference, but real tears. He was talking about how he'd lost everything that mattered, how he'd been so focused on success and power that he'd forgotten what was important. And I don't know, maybe he means it. Maybe he's actually changed." Lucas sat up, looking at her with desperate, confused eyes. "What if he really is different now?" Evelyn took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. "Do you want me to get back together with your father?" Lucas was quiet for a long moment, his hands clenched in his lap. "I want a normal family. I want both my parents in the same house. I want to stop going back and forth between two homes, packing a bag every weekend, trying to remember what stuff is at which house. I want..." His voice broke entirely. "I want to stop feeling like I'm the only thing holding the pieces together." She pulled him into a hug, feeling his tears soak into her shirt. "Baby, you're not responsible for holding anything together. That's not your job. It's never been your job. But if you and Dad could just... if you could try... Lucas, look at me." She waited until he met her eyes. "Your father hurt me in ways that can't be fixed. He lied to me for years. He stole from me. He set me up to take the fall for his crimes. He maintained a whole second family while pretending to be committed to us. And even if I could forgive all of that, even if I could trust him again, which I can't, getting back together with him wouldn't give you a normal family. It would give you two parents who are pretending for your sake, and eventually, that pretending would poison everything. You deserve better than that." "So that's it? It's just over forever?" "The marriage is over forever. But your relationship with your father, that's up to you and him. I won't stand in the way of you loving him, Lucas. He's your dad. And despite everything, I know he loves you in his own way. That's real, and it's important, and you get to decide what that relationship looks like." Lucas pulled away, wiping his eyes roughly with his sleeve. "I don't want to talk to him about this." Will you? Will you at least hear him out? Not for him, but for me? So I can know for sure that you really tried everything? Against her better judgment, against every instinct that screamed this was a bad idea, Evelyn agreed. They met at a neutral location, a quiet restaurant where they were unlikely to be recognized. Jinwoo was already there when she arrived, sitting at a corner table, and he looked different, thinner, older, without the armor of expensive suits and corporate power. He wore casual clothes, jeans, and a simple shirt, and stood when she arrived, awkward and uncertain in a way she'd never seen him before. "Thank you for coming," he said in English, which surprised her. He'd always insisted on Korean before, always made her work to communicate in his language. "I'm here for Lucas, not for you," she said, sitting down across from him. "I know." He took a breath, his hands fidgeting with his water glass. "I've been in therapy, real therapy, not court-mandated anger management, and I've been trying to understand how I became the person who could do what I did to you, to our son, to everyone. And what have you learned? That I was raised to see relationships as transactions, power exchanges. My father taught me that love was weakness, that the only thing that mattered was control and success. He used to tell me that people were either assets or liabilities, and you managed both the same way. You leveraged what you could use and eliminated what you couldn't. And I spent my whole life trying to prove I was strong enough, successful enough, powerful enough to earn his approval. Even after he died, I was still trying to prove myself to a ghost." Evelyn said nothing, just waited. She'd heard variations of this speech before, the powerful man explaining how his childhood made him hurt people, as if understanding the cause somehow absolved him of responsibility for the effect. "I married you because you were different from the women my family wanted me to marry," Jinwoo continued. "You were strong and independent and American, and I thought that made me progressive, modern, sophisticated. But I never actually saw you as an equal. I saw you as another acquisition, another proof of how enlightened I was. Look, I married a black woman. I must be so open-minded. And when you started to want more, to expect more, to ask to be treated like a partner instead of an accessory, I resented you for it. So I found someone who would be grateful for my attention, instead of demanding I earn it. Soo-yeon, yes, and others before her. I've been unfaithful for most of our marriage, Evelyn. Not because you weren't enough, but because I was broken in ways I didn't understand. I built a whole second family, because I wanted the image of perfect domesticity, without actually having to do the work of being present. With Soo-yeon, I could play the role of devoted father for a few days, and then leave. I got all the satisfaction without any of the daily responsibility. She wanted to be moved by this confession, but mostly she just felt tired. Why are you telling me this? Because Lucas asked me to, because he wants us to try again, and I owe it to him to be honest with you about who I was and who I'm trying to become. Jinwoo met her eyes for the first time, and she saw something raw there, something that might have been genuine remorse. And because I do love you, I know I have no right to say that, and I know you have no reason to believe me. But it's true. I love you, and I destroyed us, and I will spend the rest of my life regretting it. I don't love you anymore, Evelyn said quietly, and watched him flinch. I don't hate you either, which is progress, but the person you fell in love with, the woman who believed in you and supported you and made herself small so you could feel big, she doesn't exist anymore. I'm not her. I'll never be her again. And I don't want to be. I know. So this conversation is pointless. We're not getting back together. We're not going to be a family again. Lucas needs to accept that. And so do you. Jinwoo nodded slowly, something breaking behind his eyes. Can I ask, are you happy? In your life now? Without me? Are you happy? Evelyn thought about her office at Dihan Technologies, about the employees who greeted her by name now, about the quarterly reports showing steady growth and restored pensions. She thought about Lucas's laugh when they cooked dinner together, about her small circle of real friends, about the quiet satisfaction of building something honest and good from the ruins Jinwoo had left behind. She thought about waking up in the morning and not having to brace herself for criticism or condescension, about making decisions without second-guessing whether they'd anger him, about taking up space in her own life. "Yes," she said, "I'm happy. Then I'm glad. Truly. You deserve happiness." They parted awkwardly, and Evelyn drove home feeling lighter somehow, like she'd put down a weight she didn't know she was still carrying. Jinwoo's apology didn't change anything. It couldn't undo years of harm or rebuild trust that had been completely shattered. But it did give her something she hadn't realized she needed: confirmation that the failure of their marriage wasn't her fault, that she'd done nothing wrong by wanting to be seen and valued and loved as an equal. But Lucas struggled. Over the next few months, his grades slipped from A's to C's. He stopped hanging out with friends, stopped playing soccer, stopped engaging with the activities that used to bring him joy. He was polite and distant with both parents, going through the motions of his life without actually living it. Evelyn tried talking to him, tried therapy, tried everything she could think of, but nothing seemed to reach him. He was drowning in the wreckage of his parents' marriage, and she didn't know how to save him. Then one Friday afternoon in the late spring, Lucas didn't come home from school. His phone was off, his friends hadn't seen him since lunch, and security footage showed him leaving the building alone and getting on a bus headed out of Seoul. Evelyn called Jinwoo in a panic, and for the first time since the divorce, they worked together, calling hospitals, police stations, Lucas's friends, anywhere he might have gone. "Where would he go?" Jinwoo asked, his voice tight with fear. "If he's running away, where would he feel safe?" Evelyn's mind raced through possibilities. Not Jinwoo's mother's house. Lucas hated going there. Not friends' houses. The police had already checked. Then it hit her. My grandmother's grave, in Daegu. Why would he? Because she's the only person who ever made him feel like he fully belonged somewhere. She never cared that he was mixed, never made him choose between being Korean or American. She just loved him. Evelyn's voice broke. God, why didn't I think of it sooner? He's been there for 3 days. They drove to Daegu together, the first time they'd been in a car alone since the divorce, the tension thick enough to choke on. Jinwoo drove while Evelyn called the local police, called hospitals, called everyone she could think of. They found Lucas just as the sun was setting, sitting against his great-grandmother's headstone, his backpack beside him, his face streaked with dirt and tears. When he saw both his parents arrive together, he didn't try to run. He just sat there, looking small and exhausted, and so much younger than 15. "I'm sorry," Lucas said, his voice raw. "I'm sorry. I needed to go somewhere that felt safe. Somewhere that wasn't part of all the fighting and lying and anger. Somewhere that was just mine." Evelyn and Jinwoo sat on either side of him, and for a moment, they were just 3 damaged people trying to figure out how to be a family in a way that didn't destroy them all. "Why didn't you tell us you were struggling this much?" Evelyn asked gently. "Because you both have so much going on. Mom, you're trying to save a company and rebuild your whole life. Dad, you're trying to prove you're not the bad guy anymore. And I'm just the kid caught in the middle, trying not to make things worse for either of you." "You're not just anything," Jinwoo said, his voice thick with emotion. "You're our son. You're the most important person in both our lives." "Then why does it feel like I'm the only one trying to hold us together? Like if I stop trying, we'll just fall apart completely?" "I don't want you to get back together," Lucas continued, his words tumbling out in a rush. "I thought I did, but I don't. I want you to stop hating each other. I want to stop feeling like I have to choose between you. I want us to be able to be in the same room without it being weird or tense, or like everyone's waiting for a fight to start. I want to be able to talk about mom to dad without feeling guilty, or talk about dad to mom without worrying she'll get upset. I just want us to be okay." "We can do that," Evelyn said softly, looking at Jinwoo over their son's head. We will do that, Jinwoo agreed. Whatever it takes. Lucas, I know I've failed you in more ways than I can count. But I'm here now and I'm not going anywhere. Your mom and we're going to figure out how to be better. For you. They started family therapy the following week. All three of them. Together. Evelyn had been skeptical at first, worried that sitting in a room with Jinwoo for an hour every week would undo all the healing she'd accomplished. But Dr. Kim, their therapist, was skilled at keeping the sessions focused on Lucas's needs rather than becoming a rehash of the divorce. It was uncomfortable and painful, full of hard truths and difficult conversations. Jinwoo had to hear, really hear, how his actions had impacted Lucas. Not just the affair or the lies, but the hundreds of small abandonments that had accumulated over years. The missed games and concerts, the broken promises, the way he'd always prioritized work over family, even when work meant his secret second family. Evelyn had to confront her own failures, the way she'd tried to protect Lucas by hiding the truth, making him complicit in the facade of their perfect family. The way she'd sometimes used him as emotional support during the divorce, putting burdens on him that no child should carry. Slowly, incrementally, they learned how to be in each other's presence without the weight of betrayal and anger suffocating everything. Jinwoo learned to take responsibility for his actions without making excuses or asking for forgiveness he hadn't earned. Evelyn learned to separate her rightful anger at Jinwoo from Lucas's need to maintain a relationship with his father. And Lucas learned that his parents' failures weren't his to fix, that he could love them both without having to make them love each other. 2 years after the divorce, they attended Lucas's school play together. Him in the lead role, something he'd never have tried when he was drowning in their conflict. They sat side by side in the auditorium, not touching, but not flinching away from each other either. When Lucas stepped onto the stage and transformed into his character, Evelyn felt Jinwoo lean slightly in her direction. He's good, Jinwoo whispered. Really good. He is, Evelyn agreed. He gets his confidence from you, but his kindness, that's all his own. When it was over, they stood together to applaud, and for just a moment, Evelyn caught Jinwoo's eye and saw something there that might have been peace. Later, at the small celebration dinner Lucas had requested, just the three of them at his favorite Korean barbecue restaurant, Jinwoo cleared his throat awkwardly. I've been offered a position, he said, looking at Evelyn. At Daehan, not executive, operations management, entry level really. The board thinks my experience could be valuable if I'm willing to work my way back up and submit to oversight. Evelyn hadn't known about this, and the surprise must have shown on her face. I haven't accepted yet, Jinwoo continued. I wanted to ask you first, if it makes you uncomfortable, if you'd rather I stayed away from the company. I understand. It's your company now. You built it back from what I destroyed. I have no right to be there. She thought about it carefully, weighing the complications against the potential benefits. Could she work with him, even in a limited capacity? Could she trust him enough to give him another chance, not in their personal relationship, but in the business she'd rebuilt? What would it mean for Lucas to see his parents collaborating instead of competing? What would it mean for the employees who'd lost so much because of Jinwoo's crimes to see him back in the building? Take the job, she said finally, but understand, you're not getting special treatment because you used to own the company or because you're my ex-husband. You work hard, you follow the rules, you earn your place like everyone else. And the moment you cross a line, the moment you try to manipulate or deceive or take advantage, you're done. No second chances. I wouldn't want it any other way. Lucas's face when he looked between his parents was luminous with hope and relief. You mean it? You're really going to work together? We're going to try, Evelyn said. No promises, but we're going to try. The ending Evelyn had imagined for herself, triumphant, independent, completely free of Jinwoo, wasn't the ending she got. Instead, she got something more complicated and more real. She got a life where her ex-husband was a colleague she occasionally collaborated with, where they co-parented with genuine respect, if not warmth, where their son could love them both without guilt or divided loyalty. She got a company she'd built from crisis into stability, with employees who trusted her because she'd proven herself worthy of that trust day after day. She got a reputation earned through her own work rather than her husband's name, or her grandmother's inheritance, or blind lottery luck. She got quiet evenings with Lucas, cooking meals and talking about his day, planning his future, watching him grow into someone confident and kind. She got friendships that sustained her, and occasional dates that sometimes led somewhere, and sometimes didn't. And that was fine too. She got to be someone who took up space in the world, who made decisions that affected thousands of lives, who was seen and heard and valued for who she actually was. She got herself back. Not the woman she'd been before Jinwoo, and not the woman she'd been during the marriage, but someone new, someone stronger and more certain, someone who knew her own worth and wouldn't settle for less than she deserved. On the 3rd anniversary of her lottery win, Evelyn stood at her office window looking out over Seoul and thought about the woman who'd stood outside her husband's office door 3 years ago, lottery ticket in her purse, about to discover her entire life was a lie. That woman had been so small, so desperate for validation, so convinced that money would finally make her visible. This woman, the woman she was now, didn't need money or marriage or anyone else's approval to know she mattered. She'd learned that the hard way, through pain and betrayal and the slow, difficult work of rebuilding. But she'd learned it. Her phone buzzed. Lucas, asking what she wanted for dinner. Jinwoo, with a question about a project at work, his tone professional and respectful. Minji, now her chief of staff, with the schedule for tomorrow's board meeting. Attorney Yoon, checking in just to see how she was doing, their professional relationship having evolved into genuine friendship. A whole life, complicated and imperfect, and completely her own. Evelyn smiled and started answering messages, already thinking about what came next. A new initiative to support employee education, Lucas's college applications, a potential expansion into sustainable technology. So many possibilities, so much still to build. Before you close this video, I need you to understand something. Evelyn could have run. She could have taken that $80 million and disappeared, started over somewhere Jinwoo couldn't find her. She could have let Daihan Technologies collapse and all those workers lose everything. But she didn't. She stayed and fought and rebuilt. Not for revenge, for justice. And if that doesn't deserve your subscription, I don't know what does. Hit that subscribe button if you believe women deserve to take up space. Like this video if you've ever had to choose between being nice and being free. And comment below with the exact moment you stopped making yourself small for someone else. What was your office door moment? When did you finally see the truth? Because here's what I know, someone watching this right now is standing outside their own door. They're about to discover something that will shatter them. And they need to know they're not alone. They need to know they can survive this. They need your comment to give them courage. So don't just watch and leave. Be part of this. Share this video. Tag someone who needs to hear it. Let's build something together. A community of women who refuse to stay invisible, who refuse to stay small, who refuse to let anyone else define their worth. I'll see you in the next one. And trust me, you're going to want to be subscribed for that.